2020 will mark 150 years of the Cedar Point amusement park. During that time, roller coaster records have been no stranger to Sandusky, Ohio. Opened in 1870, the park is the second oldest operating amusement park in the United States. Now with 17 roller coasters of all sizes, heights, and speeds, including the world's first Hypercoaster Magnum XL-200. Welcome to Expedition Cedar Point.
The highest, the fastest, the steepest roller coaster on Earth. Even when you see it, you won't believe it.
Prior to 1870, the Cedar Point Peninsula was mainly used for fishing and hunting. That, however, changed when a local newspaper in 1867 called for some enterprising person to utilize the magnificent beach on the lakeside of Cedar Point. In the summer of 1870, local businessman Louis Sistow opened a small beer garden, bathhouse, and dance floor on the land. He would bring guests over on his steamboat, Young Reindeer, to experience the lush beaches and entertainment. Within 10 years, visiting the peninsula had become all of the rage for locals, and more continued to be added to keep guests entertained. Bathhouses and dance halls, along with live performances, continued to be added. In 1888, a grand pavilion was added with bowling alleys and dining facilities to expand the offerings even more. The park would add its first roller coaster, the Switchback Railway, 22 years later in 1892. Inspired by the hit Coney Island attraction, it sent riders down 600 feet of track from a height of 25 feet, reaching speeds of 6 to 10 miles per hour. The new addition was hugely popular, and more continued to again be added to the peninsula to entertain the increasing amount of visitors. The novelty began to wear off, and the park began to struggle until in 1897, George Boakling would purchase the park for $250,000. George operated and owned one of the steamers that would transport guests to Cedar Point. He would become credited as the man who would set Cedar Point on its path to become a nationally recognized amusement park and resort destination. Ahead of his time, he realized the potential of offering a varied experience along with hotel resorts to get guests to stay longer. He would dedicate his lifetime to making that happen, with new hotels opening, including the historic Hotel Breakers. More and more coasters will be added to the park, with Leap the Dips in 1912 and the Cyclone in 1929, among others. 2 years after the Cyclone opened, in 1931, George passed away. While he had paved the way for the Cedar Point of today, he had always marketed it as a bathing resort complete with shows, exhibits, and other forms of entertainment, never fully emphasizing the park's rides. Cedar Point, though, was well on its way to becoming a fully fledged amusement park. After his death, little investment was put into the resort, with multiple rides being demolished. The resort only managed to operate through the Depression due to the ballroom hosting some of the US's top big bands. By the end of the war, Cedar Point was in need of drastic financial help. The Cyclone was rotten and the boardwalks cracked. In 1951, the Cyclone was demolished due to its poor condition, and for the first time in many years, the park was without a roller coaster. In 1956, the park was purchased by two land developers, hoping to construct a housing development. Eventually, they decided to keep the park and try and make it into the Disneyland of the Midwest. Numerous improvements were made and over $1.2 million were invested in the site. In 1964, the current oldest operating roller coaster in the park, the Blue Streak, opened. The investments continue to come with brand new roller coasters and attractions. In 1972, Dick Kinzel sent two resumes out, one to Cedar Point's food department, the other to the new Walt Disney World in Florida. Disney officials responded, telling him they did not have a position. Cedar Point, however, liked what they saw and offered him a role paying $14,000 a year. He accepted instantly. Dick Kinzel joined the Cedar Park Company in food services in 1972 when the park was 102 years old. Starting out as the assistant manager of food services, just a few years later, he was the VP of all Cedar Point food services. At the time, huge amounts of people were leaving to work at Marriott. Dick felt it was time for something different and applied for a job within operations. In his new role, the first coaster he purchased was the record-breaking Corkscrew. Both Dick and the park's VP of Planning and Design had visited Opryland Theme Park and liked what they saw. Built by Arrow Development, the ride had premiered in 1975 at both Opryland and Knott's Berry Farm. Arrow president and chief ride designer Ron Toomer was contracted and given one instruction: to add another element to make it bigger and better than the two that already existed. A loop was added and the $1.75 million coaster opened in 1976. An instant success, Cedar Point's attendance topped the 3 million visitor mark for the first time ever. To try and continue this success, Dick immediately started shopping for another record-breaking coaster. He found a twin racing coaster and once again called Ron Toomer, this time premiering in 1978.
It was buried alive in ice and snow, but Gemini was too mean to die. It's knowing you would return. Finally, spring came to Cedar Point. Arrived on anger and rage. Gemini's cold heart began to pound. Evil rushed through its icy veins. Gemini was free. Gemini.
Arrow's twin-tracked racing coaster, named Gemini, premiered as the tallest and fastest roller coaster of any kind ever built. Costing $3.4 million, the ride was huge compared to the other coasters in the park, with a 125-foot lift hill and a 118-foot drop. The park reached another attendance record. The only issue with this ride though was it wasn't actually the tallest or fastest coaster of any kind built. A few weeks earlier, the Loch Ness Monster had opened at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, which had a taller height even though the drop was slightly smaller than Gemini. 2 years earlier, at Six Flags St. Louis, Screaming Eagle had opened, which was 2 miles per hour faster than Gemini.
Wonderful ride. Then after that, you're ready for many, many more. Absolutely fantastic. Whoa, good ride. I'm ready to do that again, I think. So let me do that. Whoa.
Due to these successes, Dick, who had just 1 year of college and 6 years in-park experience, was asked to head a new park in the Cedar family, Valley Fair. He took the job, but it was not easy, with the park's CFO criticizing him for his lack of knowledge of running a park. That CFO was quickly fired. Dick built himself a strong team and got to work on the park. During his time in charge, the new park increased attendance from less than 800,000 to more than 1 million. Dick had used the same formula that had worked at Cedar Point and soon installed an Arrow corkscrew. Learning hands-on at Valley Fair had taught him not only to run a park, but the whole company, while also taking night classes to expand that knowledge. To continue learning, he would visit other parks during the winter months, most notably the Walt Disney Resort in Florida, even taking the Disney Approach to People Management seminar to understand the Disney way. He knew that the Cedar Parks could never compete with them as far as capital, but he also knew that he could try and match them in quality and service. Dick knew that the Cedar Parks weren't about themed experiences, but was more of a pure amusement park. That didn't stop him trying to theme a ride though, one that was a disaster, literally. The parks planned to take the company private to stop all hostile takeover requests. The new company would include both parks and would become Cedar Fair, a mixture of Cedar Point and Valley Fair. One of the new 11 owners would be Dick Kinzel himself. Dick Kinzel would take over as president and CEO in 1986. Cedar Fair at the time was a $100 million company with 2 parks and a hotel. His return to the Cedar Point Park kickstarted a new era of investment, great work ethic, and respect. Someone who knew and loved the parks.
Terror pounds in your heart as you're thrown over the edge of Gemini at Cedar Point. Corkscrew twists your body through its cold steel coils. Fear explodes in your brain as Demon Drop crashes you to earth. Cedar Point. We make you scream for more every summer.
In 1987, now Cedar Point's top man, he knew once again he would use the formula that had been so successful in his past. Going big and fast would pack the park and bring people in. It had now been 11 years since Gemini had opened, and Cedar Point would aim to break the height and speed records. This time, for real, creating a new class of roller coaster, the Hypercoaster. In 1987, he had seen video clips of an upcoming ride called Bandit, a 167-foot tall coaster that had opened in Japan by Togo. It had no loops or corkscrews, not even any helixes. It was just a smooth, fast, tall ride. While Arrow's Ron Toomer was already in the park building the suspended Iron Dragon, he was asked about the tallest coaster in the world. It was currently going to be the 170-foot tall multi-element Shockwave that he was building for Six Flags Great America. Asked if he could top that, he said yes, with no hesitation. Cedar Point also talked with Togo, the Japanese-based company that had built Bandit, but due to the weakness of the dollar at the time, the price was too much. Arrow could make the tallest ride in the world for $7 million, over double what the park had paid for Gemini. The ride had to be approved by the board, and when proposed at 187-foot tall, one of them asked, why not go over 200? The additional height wouldn't cost too much extra at all. The first Hypercoaster had the go-ahead. In 1989, Cedar Point would debut the world's tallest roller coaster, and the first over 200 feet tall, with a final cost of $8 million.
Dozens of roller coaster enthusiasts are streaming into Cedar Point today to take on their latest challenge, the tallest and fastest roller coaster of them all. Excitement is at fever pitch.
The new coaster would be called Magnum XL-200. The XL was for extra long, and the 200 to show that it tops 200 feet. At the time, the tallest, fastest roller coaster ever built, standing at 205 feet tall, reaching 72 miles per hour on 5,106 feet of track. The ride was officially announced in August 1988. 1 week before opening, trains had still not been tested, completing a full circuit. Dick walked up just as the first full circuit test was about to begin. After one full successful test, Dick and a few maintenance workers were riding. That very first ride, the trim brakes didn't work before the final turn, and the trains flew around the final bend at breakneck speed. Everyone was safe, but it offered a once-in-a-lifetime scary ride. After less than 1 week of testing, the ride opened on May 6, 1989.
When you're all grown up, you're ready for the Magnum.
Classified as the first hypercoaster and an out and back coaster, the ride travels along the shores of the peninsula. After the drop, featuring a mixture of hills and turns, the first at 157 feet, the second 80 feet, and a smaller third hill, along with multiple airtime hills and a tunnel, the journey would take just over 2 minutes. Unlike most modern coasters, the ride was not designed on a computer, but bent by eye and hand-welded on site by an engineer, which explains the sometimes rougher ride than more recently designed coasters.
The older designs, such as Magnum and the rides that came before it, weren't computer designed. They were hand-bent, if you will, and eyeball bent. So it took a craftsman to build this kind of roller coaster, somebody who really knew what they were doing with a bending machine.
The ride was a huge success and set another new record year for the park, making back its cost in just one season, topping the 3 million guest mark for the 5th time in a row, with 3.2 million guests coming through the gate. For the first year, the ride's lines reached over 3 hours long.
Well, let the riders tell you what it's like.
I'm shaking, but give me a few minutes.
It was there!
It was there, it was real, it was there. there. We arrived. We survived. It was great.
The ride did have some troubles after opening. The trains originally had pads under the rails instead of upstop wheels, which resulted in a spark fest at night, along with one of the hills being so rough it had to be reprofiled slightly.
Fastest, steepest roller coaster in the world, where it broke yesterday. Now, no one was injured, but the roller coaster is still out of service right now, and tonight at 6 o'clock we'll tell you what happened.
After Cedar Point showcases the world's steepest, highest, and fastest roller coaster, the Magnum XL-200 grinds to a halt.
Amidst multiple stalls and downtimes.
I don't think that it's really going to tarnish Cedar Point's image. We handled it very professionally. No one was hurt.
Today, Magnum still runs as one of the best rides in the park, over 30 years after it opened. It would begin the coaster wars of the 1990s and create a new term, Hypercoaster, for full circuit rides over 200 feet. The ride will remain the tallest ride in the world until 1994, when it was taken by the Pepsi Max Big One at Blackpool Pleasure Beach in the UK. While the speed, height, and records may have all been broken over the years, Magnum XL-200 marked a major turning point for roller coasters and is an important milestone for not only Cedar Point, but the whole roller coaster industry, paving the way for bigger and smoother rides. In 2004, it was awarded the Ace Roller Coaster Landmark Award and has remained in the top 20 steel roller coasters at the Golden Ticket Awards ever since.
Cedar Point has always been known as the coaster capital of the world, with 17 coasters and more rides than any other park in the world.
Over his time as CEO and president of Cedar Fair, multiple record-breaking, thrilling, and some of the best coasters ever created will be added to the park, topping not only the 300 feet coaster mark, but also the 400 feet. By the time Dick retired in 2011, Cedar Fair was $1 billion company, with 11 parks, 5 hotels, 7 water parks, and a marina. He had been responsible for 37 coasters among those parks, with 7 over 200 feet, 3 over 300 feet, and 1 over 400, along with increasing the company's profits by 29%. Magnum XL-200 will be an inspiration for dozens of similar rides all over the world, and will be the first ever hypercoaster. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Expedition Cedar Point. If you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe to join the expedition. Over the next few episodes, we're taking a look at a handful of iconic, unique, or just full-on weird hypercoasters. So let me know which ones you would like to see covered in the comments below. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram for updates on upcoming episodes, and a special thank you to our patrons for supporting the channel. We will see you next time.
Cedar Point, America's one and only. Cedar Point, America's one and only amazement park. There is one